I want to let you in on a little secret. I really, really love short rows, and I love all of the different things you can do with them and how versatile they are. And what's actually really nice as a knitter is that when you use short rows, you're not ever changing the stitch count. So you can drop them in somewhere in a pattern, and then when you finish them, you just continue on with the pattern as written. So it gives you a lot of control as a knitter without having to spend a lot of time doing calculations. You may also wonder what short rows are. You're like, it's like, I don't know what you're talking about, Carol. So we'll take a look in this video about what short rows are, where you'll use them, and the variety of different types there are available. So let's jump in first of all, going right back to the start, taking a look at what short rows are. At their most basic, a short row is where you don't finish the end of a row. You knit to a certain section, you stop, and then you turn back around in the other direction. So what that's going to do is it'll mean there'll be a certain section of your work that's going to be a little deeper, but the entire row around won't be deeper all the way around. So it's putting a little bit and one part that's got a few more rows in. So that sounds pretty straightforward, and the reason it becomes anyway complicated is where you turn. When you turn from one side to the other, if you don't do anything to close that gap, you're going to end up with the hole. And all of the different techniques to close that gap or to work short rows is just to stop that gap. And that's actually why there are several different techniques and why I teach a lot of different ones, because it's not a one size fit all. There are some that work in most situations, but you'll have particular cases like very loose yarn or very thick yarn, or perhaps where you're doing double layers of short rows where you might want a more specialized technique. So that's the basics of what short rows are. Then I think what's most important as a knitter is where you would use them, because there's no point knowing a technique without knowing what kind of places you'd put them in. And in fact, I use them on almost everything I knit. For this top over here, the short rows worked across the back of the neck to raise it up. When you're doing a garment, you may also opt to add in some short row shaping to create bust shaping. If you're doing something where you wanted a curved hem in the back, you can add short rows to do that. And all of those use the exact same technique. They're just putting those extra rows in a different place in the garment. If you are knitting a garment from side to side and you want to create a line, you can use short rows to create shaping like that. You do the same thing with hats knit side to side, where you start from the side and you shape the top of it. I've done it where I've done mitts and I've shaped the thumb with short rows. So there's all sorts of different places within garments or accessories where you can add short rows. I've even in fact done something with short rows to create a ball knitted from side to side where you never change the stitch count. You're knitting it across here, and because you're working short row wedges, one on top of each other, both ends curl in to create the actual ball. So it's a really good example of how extreme you can make your shaping with short rows if you so desire. So those are some of the things you can do with it. And now we'll have a quick look at the kind of techniques there are. The one most knitters would have started with would be wrap and turn, where you reach a point where you want to turn, wrap the yarn around the next stitch and go back. Then when you come back to that in subsequent rows, you knit that wrap with the stitch. There's obviously ways of tweaking it so that you can get it much tidier, but that's the basic idea. Japanese would be a variation on that. It's you reach the point where you want to turn. When you turn around, instead of wrapping around the next stitch, you put that yarn loop onto a marker or a strip of yarn that will hold it, and then you turn back and you join when you come back the exact same as you did originally, taking that loop, knitting with the next stitch or purling with the next stitch to hide where the gap was. Other one that I have done would be yarn over. I'd use that less frequently. Quite similar, you put the wrap on the needle, you knit it with the next stitch. And then there is German. German short rows are a little bit different, because with that, what you're actually doing, you reach the point where you're going to turn. Then instead of wrapping the next stitch, you slip the stitch back, lift it up and over, effectively taking the stitch from the row below and pulling it up. So instead of trying to use a wrap to join the two jumps together, you're pulling the row below up and creating a smooth join between the different rows. So it's a very nice way of doing it, very easy to use, can be used in any kind of stitch patterns. couple of times I wouldn't use it would be if I've got very loosely knit yarn, it's not going to hide it very well, or if you've got super chunky yarn, because then that double stitch is just not going to hide. So it's kind of edge cases really with German are the ones where it's not going to work so well. So this is like definitely a very fast tour about what short rows are, where you would use them, and some of the different types. But if you want to go into it a little more in depth, or if you want to practice them on projects, I have got lots of options available for you. First one is a masterclass I've done, which goes through in detail every type of short row you'd have. I've also got a short row knits book if you're more of a physical person that needs paper in front of you, where I'll talk about the pattern or how you do the short row, and then give pattern examples of how you'd use it. Or finally, if you just want to jump in and get started on a pattern, I've got a collection where I use short rows on my website, where you can just pick a pattern and you'll be able to practice short rows as you work, just looking up short tutorials on the website for the techniques as you encounter them. So those are the different ways that you can practice short rows and incorporate them into your knitting.